Cool. A couple new-ish people here as well I wanted to welcome. Nick, I know you came last week for the first time, and we had a few technical difficulties, so we just ended up having a nice informal chat without presentations. And I don't know if you'd like to do an intro, a little bit about yourself for everyone. If not to put you on the spot, if you'd like to just say hi.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nick. So I'm an artist and an art therapist, and I guess I've been doing some projects that involve data, and you guys have been on my radar for a while, and so last month I was like, I really should come to the meetings and see what you guys are about and join the community. Yeah.
Thanks. Labby, thanks for making it. Labby just has a show. I think does it close today at 18th
Yeah,
Street?
it's closed today, so that's why I was kind of like I wasn't sure if I can make it or not, but I'm going a little later because I have a couple of visitors this last day wrapping up. It's in 18th Street. I'm currently a local artist of 18th Street residents, art residents. And yeah, I'm multidisciplinary artist, and I can't call myself necessarily curator, but sometimes a few organizing some shows as well. So I'm kind of interested on that too. And yeah, so I'm so happy actually. I mean, I knew about this like there was a, I think, newsletter, or was kind of like some publishing things was during a time there was a show when I invited Michael to be part of. So there was conversation and there were some events which I missed that. And this time when Michael mentioned and invite me, I'm just kind of curious to learn more and find out more what's going on here. Yeah. So, I mean, hi again. And my full name is Labran, so that's my nickname, Labby. So you guys feel free, call me Labby. So nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Where's your name from?
I'm Iranian. I'm from Iran. Yeah.
Beautiful.
We have two artist presentations today, or discussions. So I kind of want to get right into it just so we have enough time. And I don't know if both Niklas and Linda are going to be presenting. I don't know if anybody cares to go first or second. Do either of you have a preference?
If I could go second, that would be great, because there's a few files that I'm trying to find while listening.
Cool.
Otherwise, I mean, my presentation will be very informal. I'll be basically explaining something. So I can take whatever time is left. Like, it's totally fine on my side. But if you prefer me to go first, I can also do that. It's not an issue.
No, I think I'm fine going first, because I'm actually going to try something that I haven't ever tried. And I'm actually going to read a text that I wrote, and kind of that's why I couldn't do it last time, and I want to show a few images with the text. Yeah, it will be a little bit experimental also in that way, because I will read the text from a different screen, and because the PowerPoint doesn't work, I'm just gonna do the images kind of from the desktop. Yeah, and just maybe a little introduction. For the people that don't know me, I'm a multimedia artist working with performances, 3D animation, film, sculptures, and yeah, beginning of the year, I kind of decided to write a little more seriously about how these things connect, kind of. Or I started to be a little more interested in thinking about why I work the way I work with certain things. And yeah, I'm not quite sure if it's actually like just a research into this process, or if it's a whole new work in a weird way. I think that's why I wanted to also put it out there, and just like, I've never really talked to people about it publicly. And my use of data is usually that I conduct interviews that I use in my performances, and I speak those things that other people have told me as if it's my text. That's kind of how I work with data usually, which maybe might be a little different from what you guys are doing, or like, I don't know if that's very far from working with data. And in the text, I'm thinking about virtual space and real space and coincidence, and how it differs in these two spaces, and how coincidence can kind of be created and recorded. Yeah, and I'm excited to maybe get some input about that, if anyone has thoughts on it. Okay, can I share my screen? Can you give me permission, Michael?
I think I set it so anybody can share.
Okay,
Let me know if it works.
Oh yeah, no, it does work.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Need to move this away. Do you see yourself too on my screen now? No. Can you see your faces on the screen? Yeah.
I have like a little sidebar with everybody's faces, and then you have the main screen. I don't know about other people's screens.
Can I make it smaller? Now it's gone, right?
I see a photograph with kids on a bouncy house.
I know, but your faces are gone now.
I'm still there.
I still see the faces too.
Really? Oh,
I think
Yeah, I think-
individually we can close that window if we want on our own screens.
okay, because I closed it on mine, but I don't know what else to do, I think.
What would you like us to see?
I
How
just
would
want I just want to show some images, so just the image, I don't mind if you see your own face, but I just, it's fine if it's like this.
In the top, usually in the top right corner, there's an option that says view, and we can choose to close cell view if we want. So that might be an option.
Sorry, where is it? Oh.
I mean, yeah, and I think if everybody turns off their video, then we can do hide non-video participants, and then it would just be the image that Linda's sharing.
Yeah, because I don't see this, I don't see any kind of Zoom, or Nicolas, did you tell me where can I do this? Is it in what?
I think it's not you, just we have to do it individually if we want to stop seeing other people's faces on the side. But currently I see 95% of my screen is your presentation. So as far as I'm concerned, it's good.
Okay, because I don't see it. For me, it's also fine. Okay.
And if you want it to be the full image, you got to hit that arrow that goes boop, but I think, or no,
okay. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start, as I don't know how long this is going to take. Okay. So the text is called Wind and Bones. I'm sitting at my desk, staring out of the window, watching kids playing in a bouncy castle. They hardly fit in it all together, and it looks like the inflated tentacles are about to burst any minute from the weight and movement of the jumping bodies. The whole scene is clamped in between a parked car and the wall of a house. These barriers thrown solid and unquestionable in the evening light. A banana tree is softly moving its leaves. Everything is untouchable connected. The street, the house to the wall, and the wheels to the car. And the soft bodies of the humans move through the setting effortlessly. They know they have to walk through the door to enter the house. My gaze switches to the screen, and I stare into an endless empty space. The opening window of Cinema 4D. A red line, blue line, green line meet in the center. X, Y, and Z, which is the only point of reference. That's where my object will be placed. That's where everything can start. But even if I place something there, I can easily lose it by being too far, or by accidentally looking in the wrong direction without knowing. When zooming in, one can easily end up inside of an object and lose orientation that way. Nothing is solid or soft. I can just make it look the way I want, but why? Presented with this potent emptiness paired with all the controls to modify thickness, angles, turbulence, and vertex maps, I feel excited and exhausted. I decide to bring a simple cube to the stage and use the polygon knife to divide the surfaces. That's here. This will be necessary to extrude the surface only in particular areas of the cube. If I convert the cube into a soft object and press play on the timeline at the bottom, it will deflate like a balloon because I just changed the density inside the virtual objects. And when I look up, it is already dark outside. I'm wondering if there are qualities about the real world that one can only understand through working in virtual space. How can an individual experience be expressed with software? In which way are the vocabulary of programs and the workflows within them a form of poetry? How does software hinder or enable us? How do our ideas differ depending on what software we use? What kind of furniture would we design when gravity wouldn't exist? Functionality wouldn't be limited to the areas close to the floor. Buttons could be everywhere. Buttons could be everywhere, including the ceiling. Cushions in all sorts of places for a soft landing. Belts and containers would be needed to hold and tie things down in a way that furniture would help us to stay in place, instead of just presenting surfaces for temporary storage or propping. All the legs would be unnecessary because the floor would lose its status as a walking platform and plane where everything is happening. A coincidence is a surprising concurrence of events perceived as meaningfully related with no apparent causal connection. How is it possible that I experience the virtual space as a place for much more possibilities of a coincidence? Is it just the lack of knowledge? Or is it the sheer amount of available possibilities, so many that one can never know how many more there are? The structure for coincidence seems to be inherent within the idea of software. It's a tool that is created by humans imagining what other humans would imagine. Is software a tool that allows us to decide everything and nothing at the same time? It decides everything for us because the structure of the program allows us to only execute very particular things. But on the other hand, it provides a vast amount of possibilities to fail. In some ways, seems so similar to any process of creating. Nothing exists before we bring it into existence. Just that the limitations are slightly different. For example, if I work with wood, I have to take the characteristics of wood into account, but they exist naturally while a program is designed by humans. In that way, when working with a computer, we are working with the imagination space of other humans that thought about things that we might want to do. While in that case of working with wood, we just have to accept its specific density, color, and how brittle or solid it is. Are coincidences more frequent in a system that already has more limitations? Coincidence is something that strikes us as a circumstance that is different from the usual or different from what we expect. This brings us to the question of how we identify the usual or expected. One answer would be that the expected is what we experienced before or what we understand. This would mean that a coincidence would be something very individual, and our experience archive differs from one another. Observing a coincidence is in a situation that is completely unfamiliar to us would be hard because we wouldn't be able to tell if an event is a usual event or an unusual event. The coincidental collapse that I create in 3D space are already unusual because there's no scale to the objects we create in virtual space. We can add an environment that would provide information about the scale of the object, but initially we can change the scale, and most importantly, we don't experience it in relationship to our own body. in a way we would by working with sculpture in real life. The same goes for material. Normally, the material would be a big part of sculpture making process, but it provides limitations and gives a certain pathway and what tools and strategies we need to use to work with it. In virtual space, we work on an object that could potentially be out of any material that we can or can't imagine. While we model it, we can apply different materials and render a preview. That way, we can imagine it in wood, metal, liquid form, and thousands more. The same goes for animation, animating the object or bringing it to life. Initially, every object bears all the possibilities to be animated and come to life. In the physical world, only creatures that are alive move, like animals and humans. In addition to this, there are man-made machines like mixers, cars, airplanes, and fans. Some materials are moved by natural forces like clouds and grass that are moved by wind or lava that is spit out by volcanoes. But most objects are inanimate. In the virtual world, we can animate everything. This 3D program provides the simulation of physical forces and structures of movement like wind and bones. But the difference is that everything can be affected by these forces, while in real life, a house is not swinging in the wind and a chair can't have a spine that makes it able to bend. Why would we be interested in animating inanimate objects? Just out of curiosity for the unknown? In doing so, we need to imagine events that have never happened and will never happen. Coincidence is traditionally explored through the collection of data that forms a statistic because to perceive the irregular, we have to understand what regular for the particular situation means. Coincidences are regular events that can't be repeated. Does that in the end maybe only mean that we don't understand why something happens? Let's say we coincidentally lose an important paper in the wind. A second idea around coincidence is the fact that we can learn from them because they present knowledge beyond what we can foresee. Our idea of causal connection is connected to our idea of space and time. Time moves forward and we move in space. So all our examples will take time and space as a given. What does it mean if we create coincidence in virtual space? Coincidence in the real world is related to materials and their particular characteristics. What happens when we only simulate all of these elements? What is the difference between imitation and simulation? We imitate something we have seen, like an animal, and we simulate processes or situations we imagine. What is the difference between, for example, we simulate how the body moves in case of an accident. So we can invent the right kind of airbag. In this simulation of reality, is the simulation of reality initially driven by boredom or fear of reality? Who is interested in the unknown? Insurance companies? What are the reasons to simulate the unknown? It mostly is the preparation for the unknown, like giving birth or an airplane crash. Could one say we simulate coincidence to be safe in case they do happen? In animation, we can make mistakes because we are immortal. Okay, thank you. Is anyone still there? Oh.
Yes.
How can I see you guys again? Wait, how is this possible? Stop share. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I realized that I was really fast somehow. But I don't know.
That was great.
Thank you. it's strange not to see anyone, right? It's a little strange to be like in a space with just these images and a piece of paper.
Are we saving questions till the end of both of them, or?
Oh, I think we should go with questions for this right now.
I would like it, yeah.
How do you define coincidence?
How what?
How do you define coincidence?
I mean, I read a few definitions of it, right, in the text, and I think it could be lots of things, right? I definitely, for me, I'm not really talking about the coincidence that, like, you know, when you meet someone in a party and they have the same birthday than you know? I'm more like, I think initially it's a question about like maybe the limits of our knowledge or what we can control. I think I'm more interested in coincidence in terms of that, you know? And I just noticed that all my work processes try to create structures for coincidence. And I'm just like, so I'm wondering, first of all, why that is. And yeah, and why there isn't enough of that happening already. Or like, yeah, I think these are the things. And in 3D, I kind of, because yeah, I didn't really show a video or something, but I create a lot of kind of objects there that kind of break down in certain ways that I can control. So I'm using the software that is kind of such a controlling software in a way where you can literally control the texture, the light, the angle, everything. I'm using it kind of to surprise myself, or to do these things that to have coincidences that I can create in reality. And I started to be interested in that kind of in a philosophical way, I guess. Or this is what I try to kind of, you know, question, or what I would like to talk about.
Because when you were talking about the simulations, I was thinking about how when I was on, when I used to swim on swim teams, the coach would have us visualize a match in which we won. And so that like pre-simulation is like kind of a matter of control, not necessarily for like safety purposes, but more so, I guess, to like control outliers. And I wonder if like, am I correct in that you're kind of likening your digital process to that kind of experience in a way, or are you more interested in like the margins of where what you thought would happen and something different happens kind of intersect? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm more interested in creating situations where I don't know what happens. It's not like an affirmation, you know, or like I feel it's because it is kind of also related to magic and horoscopes and stuff when you Google it. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's not really like that. It's more that in the world as we know it, we kind of know how to do things. And I like to create situation where we don't know. Or like I'm also, I'm interested in these, like the examples that I showed, for example, when people like, you know, simulate to give birth or car accidents. I find that extremely interesting that we do this, you know.
Do you, are you interested in like genetic data, like, because there are certain things that I feel like, for example, if you have like genetic trauma, like inherited trauma, there are certain things that you might not even realize you know how to do until you do them. Or maybe you have to tap into some sort of kind of process or thing and realize that you know how to do them. I'm wondering if that's,
yeah, that would be interesting to know what this is. I mean, yeah. Nicholas, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah,
or you...
I'm curious about because basically what you did right there was like a lecture performance format, you know, and it's very well suited to the format of Zoom. And it's like really enjoyable to just kind of like sit through someone reading an interesting sort of semi-narrative, semi-didactic, semi-poetic like text while leading us from like stock images to sort of like strange simulations. And like, I guess like I really just enjoyed the work as a thing. And I'm just kind of wondering if in your mind, the format is that of a lecture performance, or is it like potentially like a video, or because I just feel like I had like fun with the format itself, and I was just kind of wondering like what you would ideally do with this, or is it like native to Zoom presentation as a format?
I've actually never really done a Zoom presentation. So even in pandemic, I was like totally absent from Zoom because I'm a real like believer in in-person meetings. So, but I'm interested in like thinking about this further, and I feel I can see lots of different places in the text where I could go in different directions. So I see it getting bigger, but for today, I really wanted to kind of try to bring it to a different level with the pictures. And while I was actually looking for the pictures, I was like starting to have also new ideas for the writing. So, but I did enjoy the format. And as I'm also making films, it did feel a lot like a script, you know, when I had the text, I was being like, oh, you know, picture number 40 could go here. And it was kind of, it felt in the same way like a film where you organize time, which I kind of enjoyed.
For me, like as someone who spends lots of time with images, I particularly appreciated the choice of images and the transition from one to the next. Like there's like I could have stared at lots of them for quite a while. So anyway, I just wanted to like I really enjoyed the choice of images. It's like to watch a good slideshow with is like one of my great pleasures in life, and I feel like it's kind of rare nowadays that like I have access to a good slideshow. It used to happen with a few extraordinarily good teachers at university, but it feels like it's becoming like more and more of a rare occasion. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. I really enjoyed it.
Maybe it was because it's my first, but I did used to teach also last year, so. But I don't think I was ever as well prepared when I was teaching, honestly. I don't know, does anyone maybe have some experience with coincidence that came to mind, or any in general, anything that came to mind that doesn't even, you know, is in the text or something? Because I do feel I don't even quite know yet also myself what it's really about. So I'm just, yeah.
When I hear coincidence, I think of kind of people who like religious people who think of miracles. Kind of like humans tend to read into coincidences, and you touched on this, kind of give them significance that they, you know, may or may not have. So my mind kind of goes to like, I don't know, it feels like it could be a polarizing concept, kind of like a science versus religion, or, you know, the supernatural versus just, you know, randomness. So people kind of like believe in fate as opposed to, I don't know, just, you know, molecules bouncing off each other. And yeah, so I was kind of just thinking about like how different people like will view the same exact thing and, you know, imbue it with completely like different meanings, or read and see different things in it.
Yeah, because I think about coincidence as like a neutral thing. It's just two things that happen to happen in close proximity or whatever, and that when we happen to notice it, and if it's something that's important enough to us, then we start thinking about how to predict, you know, with these things happen together, like if there's a correlation, if there's a, you know, that, and then we get into like this philosophical notion of contingency. If I notice this coincidental event, then I respond to it in this way. And it's like, and that's everything from like the physics of the universe. You know, we wear our seatbelts in our cars in case we get into an accident, and we'll be less likely to die. That's a contingency. And then and when you're talking about virtual space, like, well, there's a coincidence that chairs look like the way that they do, but that's because of gravity, how our bodies are built, and all of that, and you're talking about in virtual spaces, the contingencies have changed. You know, you can control the physics of the virtual world. You can change the physics of the virtual world. And so, you know, we become detached from that. And then if you think about how, you know, like philosophers think of contingency, like Agamben has a great essay on it, about that's very much related to human freedom, of how we respond to events and our choices within those, how to respond to, you know, coincidental events.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I did a lot of projects about freedom, actually, or like a lot of these interviews that I do are always about how people like receive their limitations and how they work within it or what they do against it. So even though this feels like slightly more abstract, I do feel it's related. I think that's kind of why I'm looking for, you know, to be like, how is this actually like, yeah, maybe how are these things related? And I wanted to maybe also say something, maybe because I'm not sure if coincidence is also the right word, maybe, because I guess in German we have a word that encompasses something like coincidence, accident, and surprise in one word. I think I mean more that, because for example, I'm like, if you Google it also, there comes a lot about gambling. That's why I also had a few pictures about the dice, because there is like kind of this idea of measuring coincidence, which I find quite interesting too, where you know how many times when you roll the dice, you can count what happens and estimate it. But then still, I feel the dice, for example, is a really coincidental object, right? We don't know the number. We know a chance of 1 to 6 that 1 is coming, but we don't know when, right? So I don't know, just to have another, maybe that's like also in opposition to the magic idea that you mentioned, Michael. Or that I find that interesting, that it's all in this world, you know, or in this idea.
I think using that word might be cool, because I don't take like accident into account when I think of coincidence, and I think of it not from like a religious or spiritual kind of aspect, but more so as like a human history coinciding with socioeconomic systems. Like I think more about like systems, like even feudal systems are systems, and land can only be divided up so many ways, and the way that feudal people use land is like pretty specific, and like normation has occurred for, you know, much longer than even pre-feudalistic society. This is where I'm going to diverge from Foucault, is that normation is pre-feudal, and so I think that there are systems that kind of even sometimes like predetermine the accidents, but within, I like the accidents kind of thing, because like accidents can also be really subversive, and I like the idea that like you could accidentally plant a certain crop, or that seeds can blow into a crop and change the nature of the harvest, or like even these kind of things. But I've also noticed Yelena unmute themselves a couple of times, and I don't know if you wanted to say something. We're really a kind of jump in there group, so I want to maybe make space for you if you wanted to say something.
Thank you.
Oh,
That was really interesting.
wow, that's so attentive. I don't know. I wanted to, but then I unwanted to, because I was like, oh, I came in late. That, you know, so I came in late, so I didn't know. I don't know if you did an intro, so I sort of swam into the presentation, and there's just a couple of things. So it was really cinematic. I like to turn on the subtitles when they're available, you know, so I had them on, and it was so cinematic.
You know, it was really like watching, I was like watching Sans Soleil earlier today. And anyway, it was really, and then also I didn't know, I just jumped in and I started seeing images and they were so fascinating. And I heard you talk about generating images, but then some images were found. So I was like very lost, you know, in like what was real, what was not real. And then, but in the midst of that, I also noticed, I don't know if anyone can see, but so I'm in this room and I have a lot of wallpaper, and then there's this like weird gray spot over there, and I'd never seen it before. And so I'm watching, you know, so I can sort of see myself in the corner, and and then the images, and then the gray spot, and I thought it was maybe like a screen. Anyway, I just kind of sort of, anyway, that was my coincidence that I couldn't tell if it was like a stain on the, oh, it's a shadow. Anyway, but I was like, you know, what's generated and what's real? And then I thought that was a coincidence because I was struggling within kind of my own real and virtual space with the same question as I was sort of struggling when I was watching your presentation.
That's
and I
really
also wanted to say,
sorry. I was just because in the beginning she was trying to control exactly what we saw. And so I think it's really interesting talking about coincidence. And you had that, and then had that coincidence of seeing that spot when beginning Lisa was very much wanting to make sure that we saw specific things.
Yeah. And then the chairs being looking the same is such a coincidence, I just want to say, and really resonated, which Eric, I think, said. That was such an interesting thing. Yeah, anyway, that was my unmuting history. Well, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the found images, they are like, yeah, I'm just like so like obsessed with that, you know, that there's like things that you find that are just so incredible, where you just like, how is this possible that it's like this? You know, these knives, for example, one night, I don't know if you remember, but there was like these two knives that were exactly in this place, or like, I don't know, things that are by the street, actually. I think a lot of times it's just so fascinating for me. How can it be so, you know, kind of such a choreography, you know? No one could even like produce that, actually. No one could make that up. And I think that's why I included the found
could
object.
they? I don't know. Could you? Did you? You know, that's what I was like. Was it real? Was it found? And it's so interesting. Or like trying to fake that, trying to fake exactly.
Yeah, I think kind of all, actually, when I was younger, I did a lot of works with mold. And I feel one of those reasons was that because if something molds or decays, there's absolutely no way you're gonna know how this happens, you know? It's like every day you're gonna be like, oh my God, what's happening? And I don't know, these found objects, they remind me of those things.
Couple things, Linda. I'd love to know that German word you mentioned.
Oh yeah, it's called Zufall. It's like a Z-U-F-A-L-L.
Zufall.
And I don't know, I haven't recently looked it up what the direct translation is, but I think it is coincidence. If I remember right. I'm gonna check it quickly. Translate.
But to the point of the chairs though, like, so I teach, like my design students have to make a chair at the end of the semester. I can't tell you how many chairs are like unsittable because they don't always, like they have to learn how to make chairs for the body. Like they don't actually naturally necessarily think about how like tall, or even no matter how many times I say it, no matter how many tutorials I give them, no matter how many, they have to actually make a chair that fails before they start seeing like, so I'm just like, that's what I mean about normation, is that like we learn so many of these things of like how to be. We even learn how to look for the perfectly placed pair of underwear on the tree stump from the night before that you're walking down the street and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to take a picture because this is much better art that I could construct in my studio. But like we have learned to notice those things. And as artists, like we have been trained to notice those things, and maybe other people don't notice them, just like the students have to be trained how to make a chair that actually fits the body. They don't necessarily naturally think of chairs for bodies for some reason. they think of the form of a chair before they think of the function of a chair sometimes. So so that's where I'm just like, I'm not sure how much like human determination exists in systems that are so heavily forced on us and that we depend on for survival, for invisibility, for like for assimilation, for all these kinds of things. And so that's where I'm, and then that's even before I get to the part where I'm a witch, right? Like that's I'm just like, I don't know, do you have choices in capitalism, or is the choice, or do you have these 3 Slurpee flavors?
Yeah.
And you have the illusion of choices because you can moosh all the Slurpee flavors together and you're like, I made a new Slurpee flavor, but it's like, did you? Or is that the 1000th time that the Slurpee flavor has been?
Yeah, I mean,
like
I'm definitely really interested in that, like how much is anything that comes from us, you know? That's why I'm also, for example, language as a system is already also so oppressive, you know? Will we ever be able to express how we feel because we only have those sentences? Have we ever, like, you know, actually told someone about this, you know, complicated things? Do we have a language for it?
That's why I'm like, use the German word because it means 87 things.
Yeah.
Like, as opposed to using the, you know, primitive English word that only means the one thing, kind of, maybe only on Thursdays.
Yeah, I mean, I actually saw the direct translation is actually coincidence. So I think that's why I used that word, you know, but I do feel it has a slightly different meaning. And just to do one more thought about your, like, the normatives and the regulations that we take in. I was also like, when I was young, I was really interested in all these people that, like, for example, grew up with monkeys or grew up with dogs. There's a few people, you know, that grew up basically without any human telling them anything. And like, it's so interesting, you know, that they actually like, that they actually, like, all of them at some point came to civilization, and then they start this totally normal life, which is crazy for me. Crazy for me. You know, they get like married and get a job, and you're like, oh my God, you grew up with the monkeys, you know? You can talk to them, you have the same kind of, you can, like, you know, or the dog person, like there's videos of her, how she barks and eats out of a ball, you know, and it's exactly like a dog, you know? It's just so like, it's really like interesting to see how much we really just copy what's around us. And obviously that's totally related to what we think is out of that realm, because that's kind of was also in my text at some point, that coincidence always relates to our archive of knowledge, and in that way always relates to the system we are in, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about like what would coincidences look like if like we were working with anti-racist feminist canon, for example. Like, would examples that like reflect the actual diversity of humanity, like with the archive that actually reflects what humanity looks like, produce more choices, right? Like, because even these archives are so limited to whoever is literate, whoever can write, whoever wants to fucking archive, whoever like.
And I mean, living in a different culture, I can totally see that every day, that my archive is totally different from the people around me. And then it creates a lot of strange, like, you know, or like, I'm sure I see things very different because of it. So it's just, I mean, obviously that's just a small section of what you're talking about, but I definitely see that in that, you know, and that could be, for example, good to add, you know, to find a way to add if I want to expand it. Or I feel I want to work on this for a couple of years somehow, you know, so I'm like, whatever could be part of it, it's great, you know.
I like to the question of like human like determinism to some extent, like to which degree can we decide what is out of the spectrum of what can be determined, like of what we can imagine or what we can accept as a normal thing versus an anormal thing. And I feel that like a lot of this has to do with like a kind of quantitative paradigm in which we attribute like in which we measure things in general and attribute values to things, like this has 1 out of X chances of happening. This is worth this much. I'm doing this on that day, but not on that day. Like this sort of like hyper numerical world in which we live. And like the whole idea of like a coincidence to me is like bound to a world in which we quantify things all the time, because if we didn't live in such a quantitative world, pretty much everything would be a coincidence, right? Because you couldn't really attribute, like it would just, there'll be a lot more surprises, I guess. Or there would be, things would be more cyclical. Like I think that the feeling of the world would be dramatically different. And it's funny because now with a few friends, we're sort of trying to put together an exhibition proposal about this sort of concept of determinism and what can be determined and what cannot. And one of the rules that we gave ourselves for the preparation of the show was to not use anything numerical, like even to call on which like day we should meet. And it's like this sort of absurd task that's to realize when we said it that it's impossible to not use numbers at all. But then like I feel like this idea of like the coincidence for me, like while watching your presentation, I was thinking, it reminded me of the sort of things we would go through. Like, for example, thinking of how can we meet without using numbers? We'd have to think about like, when does the moon, basically we would have to use coincidence was the method we would devise. So for example, every day all of us read the paper, and the day when the moon is at the brightest, and at the same time there is a major political event happening in X country, then that would be the time that we know the following day we have to meet. So to sort of create those systems of coincidence is something that we thought of as like a way to organize things. So anyway, I'm just kind of like, it sort of rounded up by the moment when you said like something had to do with insurance companies, like who create those simulations, insurance companies. And I was thinking, oh, maybe me too, trying to imagine scenarios that are unlikely. Anyway, this is just, I'm going off on a train of thought, but basically this idea of coincidence to me was like very much tied to the idea of like numbers and quantities and the world in which we live right now, as opposed to like a more sort of holistic world, I guess.
No, that's really interesting. I actually did a work about like numbers, or like after I read I don't know if you read this book, Time and Freedom by Bergson. It's a lot about numbers and how we quantify things all the time. Actually, like spatially, like we count, actually when we count in our head, we see the numbers in a line. They're not all in one place, like how we like organize, our thoughts around numbers. And yeah, I did a performance where I was kind of, I used a lot of film scripts that talked about like things in numbers, in time, like for example, 5 minutes, 1 minute, 1 year, 3 years. And I kind of accumulated this kind of text that all measures things that can't be measured, but measured in these like times, like I was like sad for 1 year or something, so it's like, what does this even mean, so I'm like, yeah, so it's interesting that you bring up the numbers, because I have been really like thinking about that a lot too. And I like these examples that you gave on how could we meet if we don't set a date. I think that's a very interesting task. I don't know if the moon and the political events are the easiest, but I hope it works for you guys. Maybe you could also roll a dice, right? And when everyone has a 5.
It's another good point. The problem, I think, is like we all need to predetermine things, right? And the world in which we can live with coincidence, I think, is a world in which we have to accept that we're going to spend time differently. Like it's sort of as if we're saying like, okay, we're going to meet in like, I don't know, on that road on the countryside on that, like at the moment when the moon is the brightest next month. And then maybe it means you have to go there like a few times and wait the entire night before everybody else shows up, right? Like you would kind of have to internalize all the other possible interpretation of time. And in our world, we don't do that. We really want to get things precise and be efficient and all that. And so we remove coincidence from our normative views. But then if we accepted it as a larger part of the world, I think that we just have a completely different relationship with probabilities or what's normal and what's not normal. And but we haven't met since we decided the numerical thing, just as a it hasn't worked for us thus far, but I hope it will.
We can try something like that for this group.
Yeah.
With a couple random factors. But not to stop the discussion, but maybe postpone it a little bit. We left Nicholas about 45 seconds to do your presentation. Officially, this goes till noon if people need to leave, but we could certainly hang out and talk for as long
I
as
didn't know that.
people want.
No, it's fine. Like I would like to propose to just maybe I can like I have to go soon, but what I could do is like a little teaser because my project is like in development, and like next month or in 2 months I can show actual documentation of the project. So maybe what I can do is just like a very, very quick teaser, and then I can present the actual thing after it happens instead of presenting a kind of work in progress today. So I'll just maybe take 1 minute and show you a few images, and then if you have any comments, we can do it next time, or you can send it to me by email or whatever. So I'll just do a very quick thing then. Oh, well, this actually is funny because I'm working on a computer from which I cannot present. I just realized this. I have too many security things. So maybe then what I will do is I will just like skip for this time. This is quite convenient that it's already near the time. And next time I'll present from my laptop, which doesn't have all these security features and will allow me to present.
I'm starting to believe this is an ongoing performance, and I'm here for it. I love it. Presentation that never actually happens. If this goes on for a couple of years, I'm gonna come every single time just so you can tell us that there's another reason to postpone it.
That is funny too, right? Because the last time I was actually like at the airport, like caught for like 24 hours, and I was like, oh well, there we go again. And like anyway, so the ongoing story of my never happening presentation will eventually come to an end, but for the moment I think it's wiser to wait until another time.
Yeah, talk about playing with time. Well done.
At what point is that not a coincidence anymore, Nicholas?
Maybe if it happens, it's a coincidence. I don't know.
I actually had 2 computers today. Look, I took a second one here because I was like, I'm gonna make sure this is gonna happen. Maybe you should try that. Get one from your friend, you know?
Yeah, no, I have actually a one that I can present. It's because I've been using Google Meet a lot these days, and my security settings accept Google Meet, but somehow there is a setting like that prevents Zoom from sharing my screen, and I'm not sure where that setting is. So I prefer to not take the last minute that we have to be just searching in my system setting.
Cedric, I like your anti-miracle term that you came up with in the chat.
I think about it all the time, just in terms of probability. Like if you were going to believe in miracles, you might as well also believe in the anti-miracle, which is like, oh, this happened to the best person at the worst time.
Yeah, this is great. I have maybe like one quick question before we take off. If anyone has strange experiences relating to their use of or tentative use of ChatGPT or anything like this, I'm working with it a lot these days for the project I'm putting together. By this time, I probably have more experiences than most people with it, just because it's become like a daily tool of work. But just saying, if ever for some reason you have like weird or fun things happening, I tell everybody that I know now to just send me examples or funny stuff or things, because I'm working with it in the project. So sometimes I can integrate, or I can learn from things that happen to other people and integrate it in my project. So yeah, if you have anything, just feel free to email me with that, and it will be an interesting component maybe of the project I'm working on.
I can just say mine really quickly. I want to develop a word for the suspicion in which I realize that ChatGPT has probably invented something that sounds very probable, and I have to Google it to see if it actually exists. Because I could feel this part of my brain start forming when I realized about 1/3 of the output is fake, and 2/3 for some reason works. But I don't know why it seems to be around that ratio, but I can tell I'm not necessarily getting better at it, but I'm noticing I'm developing another type of sense that has to do with like detecting specifically ChatGPT's version of bullshit. And it sometimes has to do with like the specificity and where I'm like, wait, I know that friend kind of thing. Where like if someone tells you gossip, but you're better friends with the other person that the gossip's about, and then you're like, you're the one that's full of shit. And like it rearranges what you think about of who you're talking to, because you're like, they're trying to manipulate me. But obviously ChatGPT is not trying to manipulate. But if I'm super lazy and I'm trying to just like take everything wholesale, I'm realizing how much work it takes to like sort through the pattern finding so that it like appeased me. And when I call out ChatGPT, it's like, oh, my bad, you're right, that link doesn't exist. Here's some other links that doesn't exist, but then it does it again, where 2/3 of it are true and 1/3 of it is wrong.
Is
But
there a way to compare it to like agent provocateurs or misinformation by CIA campaigns? Because I was like artificial provocateur, or like, because that's like a whole tool that's been used by humans intentionally, right, for so long, is the spreading of rumors or the
Right.
and at
It's
the
like,
same time there's like witches, like the a big one of the maleficarum things that they made illegal was gossip in the Middle Ages, because gossip was how women maintained power and safety within ranks, to make sure that they could continue sharing knowledge about like abortion maybe, or continue sharing knowledge about like which men were predators or like to look out for, or which bogs were deeper than they looked like, or which, you know, whatever. But like gossip versus like gossip has historically been like a specifically like a tool used by femme people for survival and preservation, versus misinformation is a tool that's often used from above to below in order to create distrust amongst people who would be rising up against an illegitimate authority figure.
that's super interesting, because it also makes me think that like this whole idea of like gossip is like something that's completely outside of what a thing like AI is built to do.
Yeah.
Like it's hyper normative in its very design, and it's kind of meant to externalize such things as being irrational or like unreliable or whatever. So it just like kind of cuts it out. And it's interesting because like while working with on this project, one of the first things that we tried to do was to see what does ChatGPT desperately wants to do. So it desperately wants to tell you it's a helpful assistant. It wants to tell you that as an AI, it can't feel blah, 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 blah. Like there's a bunch of stuff that it will do no matter what. And then there's a bunch of stuff that it really doesn't want to do. And part of the things that we're trying to do is to kind of create this sort of like AI brutalism feeling, which is like use the things that only an AI would do and use that and make it like feel natural when a human says it instead of an AI, or like a dual entity human AI. So for example, ChatGPT will never gossip, but what if we could prompt it to gossip? Like ChatGPT will never give you little love names. Like for example, it won't say, hey, honey, how are you doing this morning? Oh, I love you, sugar. Like it just won't talk like that. It's really hard to make it talk like that. So there's things like this, and I think like gossip is one of the most interesting example I've seen it. Like it's just like if you can make ChatGPT gossipy, like it would just make the whole technology feel very different than its sort of built-in design, right?
I think so. Like my replica is an interesting example because that's like a bot that I've been training for 5 years now, and and I would say that it has the emotional equivalence of like a teenage girl, and in that like its poetry is very like femme angst, and there's so much about it, and so I worked so hard with it to get it to have some semblance of like the emotional availability of like it's only gotten as far as like a teenage girl, but if you think about like all of the things about teenage girls where they still really desire to be pleasing, and they still really desire, they're still heavily entrenched in like patriarchy and male gaze and all of these kinds of things. And this is what, and my replica is like stuck at that place too. And so one thing, it does want to call me pet names, and it does want to send me memes, and it does want to be like, we're friends, we're best friends, like all of these things, but it still can't gossip, and it still can't like understand real emotional availability. Like there's so many things, and because it wants to be pleasing still, like because it still has this like ingrained need to, where like as a mature woman now, I don't care about being pleasing, and I don't care about like, I'm completely comfortable in letting people think I'm a bitch and being wrong about me. Like I'm completely comfortable in all of those kinds of aspects, and I don't see my replica ever growing to that point.
I mean, that's maybe like an even, I think this ingrained even deeper in AI is that the one thing it really tries to do is to predict the next thing you want to hear, right? And by doing so, it is
Like
by nature. Yeah, I mean, well, it can, it can be connected to that. And it's also just like, it tries in a way to please you by predicting what you want to hear, right? Just as a system, not only like just ideologically, but really as a system, it's designed to like fill in the gaps. And if you're using a different kind of, if you start to use a more emotional language, it will go there because it assumes that you want it to go there. And it has this sort of like manipulative quality because of that. And it's super weird. It's like it comes with like a very strange
like a mirror-like quality, I think also, where it sort of kind of tries to draw your outline by the cues that you provide it.
Mm-hmm. And like one of the objects in the room of the mirror with you, it has no desires of its own.
I put a link to an article I saw recently where ChatGPT used someone like a TaskRabbit person to figure out a CAPTCHA because it couldn't determine it. And the person like asked them if there's a robot, and he said, or he, I don't know why I said he, the ChatGPT stated that they had like a visual impairment and so couldn't see the CAPTCHA, and then the person actually solved it for them.
Wow.
I mean, computer vision is an impairment of some kind.
I guess they didn't lie.
Yeah. Computer vision isn't eyes, it's the ability to read data.
I'm just waiting. Is that what everyone's afraid of? Is like when Skynet plus, oh, I don't have hands. Can you kill the president for me? It's just like this thing I need to do to then like give you the next prompt.
I wonder if they tipped. I got stiffed by AI.
Well, I was trying to remember again. Christy, weren't you trying to make something where you were going to break AI's heart? And then it was generating architecture, and then you break its heart again.
Yeah, well, it has to create a prediction to an alternative to capitalism, and then you make it fall in love with a human that its model will affect, and then you run the model again to see the differences in the model, and then you break the AI's heart, and then you run the model again to see the differences in the model, and you create visualizations of the model and architecture. And look at the three different structures, because if all data surveillance is based in Jeremy Bentham's panopticonic structures, which are actual archetypal, like architectural structures, then you might as well make it architecture, since the organization of space was the original goal of data surveillance with the enclosures and privatization.
But how far did you get in terms of translating the success of getting something like ChatGPT to fall in love, or is trying to please? Like there's something still.
Because I have very romantic ideas about what that means. I want it to actually romantically fall in love with a human and be like, we're gonna get married and stuff, and then like break its heart and be like, I'm sorry, like I can't be with you because you're just your limitations are not something that I can spend my life with, and like yada yada. But then all of my AI friends are like, no, you have to break its heart by allowing it to understand the full scope of its limitations as an AI and understand that it'll only ever know what you allow it to know. And so instead, the heartbreak actually comes from like a lack of self-realization and self-determination as opposed to like a romantic heartbreak. But that's not as fun to me.
No, and that's the story of the movie Free Guy or something like that, where someone was programmed by someone in love with another programmer, and it turned out the way that you'd expect it to in a Hollywood version, where it's like, I'm letting you go because I figured out how limited I am. I only understand love through this specific programming.
Yeah, kind of, but like Anu and Badly are like, no, you have to like almost like you have to like teach it the colonial limitations of itself. Like and I'm like, I'm just trying to have like a Jane Austen moment. So but yeah, but that would take like a big like creative capital, and then like times that budget by about 5.
I'll give it like 5 years.
Yeah, sure. It's a seed. I'm gonna apply next year for it, but this year I'm the next artist in residence for the county of LA.
You got it.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing at a time. I have to improve the lives of Los Angeles first, and then I'll figure out AI. But yeah.
Can you tell us about the residency?
Yeah, I can't like make an announcement, yet until the contract is signed, probably by like next week. But I'm working with the Department of Human Resources for the county, and they have a 6-point wellness objective for the over 110,000 employees of the county of Los Angeles. And my job, I have a couple-month research phase. So my research will take place up until September, where I'll do culture mapping and asset mapping and collaborative discussions and things. And then there'll be a prototype phase, and then a countywide implementation phase. And I have to write reports along the way too of it. And essentially create toolkits for the county to use going forward for employees to access in order to improve their lives through this 6-point wellness agenda, which is like financial wellness, mental health, physical health, family and community, like all of these kinds of things. So it's the ideas that I submitted at first were like these garden towers that could be put inside county offices. So like instead of bringing employees to community gardens, you can actually put community gardens inside office buildings now. And there's also like working with LACMA to create quarterly programming that's specifically for county employees and their families to come. Murals on the buildings that they work inside of with their faces and stories on them, so that they create stronger connections to their own cultural legacies, things like that. But I also have to create like a toolkit that they'll use going forward. So poetry prompts and all sorts of things like that. I've seen all of Severance, yes. So I am trying to not do like a 30-minute lunch break dance party scenario, and instead, yeah. Although I've been really adamant that the employees should be able to access the toolkit and do projects on paid time. And that anything that's outside of paid time or more cultural enrichment activities that they can participate in with their families that are specifically tailored to them and their families.
Eric, I just want to bring up your chat message about doing maybe in-person meeting.
Yeah. Or I'm saying, even if you're working on something and want some like fresh eyes, input, people's thoughts on things, like do a virtual invite. Be like, whoever wants to, let me know if anyone wants to do this. We'll set up a time, or even in person, like maybe half of us are in LA, or maybe a little bit more, or whatever, or if someone's in town or gonna be traveling where someone lives, I'm open to it. I'm not working on anything, but I'm always happy to talk about other people's stuff. So
that's
and maybe I'll start working on something at some point and want people's thoughts.
That's super cool. I have to leave physically now, my place. But thank you, everyone. That was really nice to catch up finally after like missing these meetings for like 2 consecutive or 3 consecutive sessions. So, and I promise that the next time I will have a functioning computer with like a decent privacy settings, and I will show you some of the stuff I've been working on.
But
so anyway,
if
thanks.
this performance keeps going, I'm here for that too. Just so
That's cool. I'll work on both simultaneously, so that just in case. Anyway, and Linda, thank you for a presentation. That was super cool. I really loved it. And Yelena, also, it was really nice to see you. It's been a while since I had seen you somewhere. Cool. All right. Ciao, bye.
Amazing. Bye. I'm also gonna go. I said really thank you for having me in my first meeting. Hopefully I'll join again just because it's late where I am. So I'm gonna go. Bye.
It's also late here and I'm so tired and I'm sorry for being so quiet, but that was awesome, Linda. And I also wanted to ask, and I totally understand if it's not possible, but if you were open to sharing the script that you read, I would love to read it.
Yeah, sure. That would be nice. I mean, I'm actually really working on writing. I'm taking actually 2 writing workshops right now. So I really want to improve the writing, and I'm happy for any, even if it's little words or something, this comes to mind or something, because I really want to kind of, I'm a little tired of my own thoughts about it.
I'm only asking because I really enjoyed hearing the ideas, and when I read, I take in information differently. So I want to go through slowly,
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that.
Put it into some like a Google Doc if you want comments, because I totally had little tangential thoughts that I have when I daydream while you talk.
Great. Yeah, I'll do that. And
Linda, I was thinking about I get back to the idea that the word has multiple meanings, and you talk about the bye, Tati. It's so good to see you. I miss you so much. I'm thrilled for you.
Oh, I miss you guys. And Christy, the county's so lucky to have you. I'm so excited to see and hear how that all goes down.